You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I am Hodey Johns.
I'm Jordan Kleinsmith.
And I'm Jacob Daniel.
And this is Enemy of My Enemy, part of the We Are Libertarians network. We got a good show for you guys today. It is certainly the hottest of the hot topics if you're a libertarian inside baseball person. We're going to be talking about the efficacy of the Mises Caucus and their messaging. Jacob Daniel is a member of the Mises Caucus. He is also a friend of mine, as is Jordan, who is not a member of the Mises Caucus. And we're going to be just kind of talking back and forth about what we think about it today. Again, the show, whole concept is we give you left, right, and center libertarian ideas. I will start being the center guy because I just kind of want to set the table for what we're going to talk about a little bit. First things first, I am bummed that we're going to talk about because Jacob was going to stand in for me anyway this week, and I really appreciated that. And then like the Mises thing became a hot topic, and then it was like, oh no, I don't want his first appearance here to just be like, oh, talk about that thing that you always talk about every time, you know, but hopefully I'll get a chance to get him back on the show and guest hosting some other times. Brian Wolgamuth was unable to stand in this week, but that makes this conversation all the better because then we actually have a member of the Mises Caucus to talk about the Mises Caucus. But yeah, I do feel sad about that, but it does have to happen, and it does make for enjoyment. So I do this for the fans. I do this for the listeners. Things that I love about the Mises Caucus, their recruitment is fantastic. They do go very grassroots. They do go local, and this is how it has to happen. People want to change a national temperature overnight, and that's just not the way it works. You start local, you win those victories, you build up. We want to believe that we can just, the next guy is going to win the presidency, and then that's going to fix everything. Yeah, imagine how one libertarian is going to do if the entire Congress is Republican and Democrats. It's probably not going to look great. So I love that they keep it local. I am a huge fan of Austrian economics. So when I started, I was later in life that I fell in love with economics. And I just started with the basics. I was like, you know what, let's start with Adam Smith. Let's move up and read Hayek, and let's read von Mises, and let's read and I actually challenged myself to read a book from every economic group there was. Sometimes there's less, sometimes there's more, depending on who's measuring. But I read, 38 different styles of economic books. And so I've also read, Marx and Proudhon and all that. And really just after reading all of them, it is hard not to love the Austrian school of thought, at least for me. And I'm aware that this is a matter of opinion. Economics is the allocation of scarce resources with no alternative uses. A lot of people have different feelings about it. I understand that it is an opinion. I believe since we're libertarians, as long as it's voluntary, I am cool with it. But if I were to sign up for a voluntary system, I would sign up for Austrian economics. So the fact the Mises Caucus talks about it and leads with it, I do like that. Some of my issues with the Mises Caucus. There is a problem with focus a little bit that I think stems from Plank 7, which is their plank about identity politics. And now here's the thing. I agree with what they say in Plank 7, that identity politics is just tribalism. You look up identity politics, and it's the consolidation of people of single racial and social backgrounds to try and consolidate them to vote only a certain way, or trying to form a singular political identity with singular views. I totally agree with that. The problem is that I'll be like, hey, these guys are trying to prevent, transgender people from receiving medicine, and they'll get taken down. It's like, well, hey, why did you guys have a problem with that? And the problem is always Plank 7. Sorry, it violates our terms of identity politics. And that's really not identity politics. For me, that's a human rights issue. Like you got to let people receive healthcare if they want. And it happens with more than just that. Obviously it happens with the border thing, where I say, hey, these people need to get let out of cages. We shouldn't be separating kids from their parents. And then it's like, oh, we took that down. Why we take it down? Well, it's identity politics. It's really just trying to consolidate everybody to vote a certain way. And I'm just like, I don't really understand how Plank 7 is used. It gets quoted a lot as far as why some of the like socially progressive stuff gets taken down. That is kind of part of what I like about libertarianism. Jacob said before, and one of the things that I really like about this concept is that he sees it as it's an economic term. It's where separate people do different things. Division of labor. Here we go. Yep. Thank you, Jacob. Oh my gosh, my brain. Here I am talking about love and Austrian economics. I forget principle 1. Anyhow, division of labor is fantastic, and I think what he said is he sees it as the Mises Caucus represents a certain brand, and they say like, hey, we're going to push these things. When you have division of labor, you need to work together with your partner. So for example, if we're making shoes and I only focus on making the leather for shoes and somebody else is only focused on making the rubber, we want to work together and be like, hey, these shoes are like really cool. I make the leather, this guy makes the rubber, and it's fantastic. Problem sometimes when you get with the Mises Caucus is they're making the leather, they're doing the economics, and then when it comes to the social issues, they actually have some really disparaging things to say. And I'm aware that this is a generalization. I have to make generalizations when we're talking about Mises Caucus because there's great people in there. I really like Jacob. I imagine, in fact, I shouldn't say imagine. I know Jacob doesn't agree with everything that some of them say. I'm making a lot of generalizations, except there is something when you see a post that gets like 100 reactions and 2 likes, and it's about being allowed to perform, open borders, for example, or, and then it gets 1,000 likes and no comments, and it's about global warming or something, or being global warming being a hoax or something like that. And it's like, look, the whole thing is, I agree with the division of labor thing. I think we got to be good business partners together, though. Not to be hypocritical, I have this exact same problem with the Audacious Caucus. I have some really good friends over there in the Audacious Caucus, like having worked with the Vermin Supreme side of things. Those guys are some really good friends of mine. Mike Shipley and Woods, James Weeks, Woods. We have cut ties. They both have said such terrible, slanderous. They've lied about great people. I can't do business with them anymore. I'm aware. I think there are only 2 members of the 9-person caucus, but the problem is when you get a caucus together and you stay really quiet when somebody is slandering a lot of other people and lying about them, you don't get to suddenly play the high ground and be like, look at all these terrible things these Mises Caucus people are doing, if you ducks aren't in a row. So the problem is I see these kind of 2 sides as like the opposite. Now, the reason we talk about the Mises Caucus more than the Audacious Caucus, because the Audacious Caucus does not have nearly the firepower or the manpower that the Mises Caucus does. And they seem to be, it's unfair that one is spoken of more than the other because I do see them as moral equivalents. I am fine with their social messaging, but they are very thin. They have a thinly veiled hostility when it comes to speaking about economic freedom. It's one of those things that you say, man, I just wish you would be audacious all the time. And I have that same feeling kind of about the Mises Caucus. I'm like, man, I just wish you guys would keep that same energy, that would be so cool if like they could keep that as part of the platform. And I understand that Plank 8 says, hey, it's not that we don't agree with all this other stuff. These are just our priorities. You just got to let other people have their priorities too. One of the big issues another big issue that I have, I've run some pages before, and generally the Mises Caucus, when there is somebody who says, like, for example, we have to be anti-racist. When that whole thing went down, they called Spike Cohen a disaster and a failure. They regretted their ever endorsing him. Same with Joe Jorgensen. They said, it's just time to let that burn, let it go down. Having run analytics for these pages, donors go up when we say stuff like that. Membership goes up. And we might not like it, but it is another way to reach out to people. It's a group of people that aren't being reached out to. And there is hostility when we say stuff like that. And I think it's a weird place to make a stand, because even if you don't think that people have to be anti-racist, it's still kind of a cool thing to do, right? Like it's why not at least encourage people to be cool? So for me, I do feel that there is a disservice when we go among people who have gone so hard on the Mises Caucus. I hate the people that their whole page is just saying, like, look at, I snuck into one of their Slack rooms and called them names for the last 15 hours. I owned the Mises Caucus. I'm like, oh yeah, you look super smart, buddy. Like, you are exactly the type of person that is galvanizing memberships. I want to join them when I see stuff like that, because it's immature, and it's not fixing the problem. It's not changing anybody's mind, even if there is a problem there. And I don't think it's fair to label it as 100% awful. I really, like I said, I love the Austrian economic side of it. When I hung with that crowd, and I was never a member of the Mises Caucus, to be clear, but when I hung with that crowd, Dave Smith, Tom Woods, Horton, all those guys, they were like kind of my first introductions to like podcasting. And I didn't pick up on any of the bad stuff until a lot later. And then when the bad stuff came up, I was like, man, maybe that's just like a mistake. Like maybe that's like a one-time oopsie, because I mean, hey, we've all had social media oopsies before. I'm certainly not angelic. I've made some mistakes with my messaging before, but there's a defensive-ness around it that I really wish wasn't there. And I think that it makes people say like, well, if you would just wholeheartedly, I think here's the thing. It's not that people are looking for condemnation, because I think they like, look, I've condemned it once and I'm not going to ever talk about it again. I think what people are looking for when we talk about these like kind of racist-ish comments, or when we associate with racists or bigots, that we want to say, hey, look, I will associate with them, but I strongly and unequivocally hate everything that's about their racism. And I'll work with them on an issue and we'll talk about that issue. But I want to make clear to everybody watching me right now that this is where I stand on this. I don't want to see somebody have an issue talk about race science and then never get into the race science because they're like, well, I don't know, I just haven't bothered to look into it. It's an important issue. If you think that different races of people are biologically superior to other people, that's an important thing to flesh out. You can't leave a conversation and not do the research afterwards to say like, well, okay, I've read some books about neurology and understand now, and talked to some geneticists, and I understand now that race science is stupid. But when you say, oh, hey, I don't know, I know he's a race scientist, but I just talk with him and whatever, it does give you that perception. It's not anything that we're strangers to here at the We're Libertarians Network. We've had people that went full crazy before, and we had to kick it. We had to put it down. The Mises Caucus will at some point police their own, but usually that comes at the point where they talk about, what was the other day, talking about like, oh, I see why Risa Willis got raped or whatever. You're just like, dude, what? Like that. And the thing is it was leading to that for a long time, and there were a lot of warning signs. And instead, it's just a boot after they cross the line, as opposed to a whole bunch of like, hey, man, we're super inclusive of people that have been sexually assaulted. We think that's a really bad thing. It's not identity politics. It's just telling somebody you love them. And it's just something that I wish I'd see from Mises Caucus. Again, I'm not overboard on them. I don't get triggered when I hear about them. I just think it's one of those that's kind of what I wish I could do better. And so, Jacob, I took a full 10 minutes. So as long as you want, friend, talk about the Mises Caucus, what it means to you, and the messaging and the efficacy.
Sure, and I'll try to address everything you said. Let me start out with just like how I came to the Mises Caucus, and kind of like why I'm a part of it, why I think it's something I want to be part of, and I think that it's a force for good within the world of liberty. So I know kind of like loosely, like through like a friend of a friend, Mike Heiss. I'm good friends with Luke Enser, who's part of the Mises Caucus, and he kind of was my gateway into that. And so I've known about them for a long time and seen them from afar. And I've always, since I've been a libertarian, been kind of an anti-political libertarian, because I felt like politics were a waste of time. Obviously, the duopoly parties are like, there's no point in trying with them, and the Libertarian Party always just kind of seemed like a joke to me. It was like, I mean, the two things that you hear about that you'd think of is that you get a bunch of like lukewarm people getting on stage saying, oh, we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal, which is just like such a cliche thing to say. Doesn't really like inspire everyone to join the party or look into it that much. And unfortunately, and I hate to bring this up because like I feel like he gets picked on so much, but people also think of James Weeks and the naked guy. That's the other thing that's commonly brought up with the Libertarian Party. So the Mises Caucus was like the first time that when I started hearing their platform and being told about them and seeing what they were doing, that was the first time that I kind of had kind of desire to maybe get into politics, into the Libertarian Party, and I didn't join it first, and I had some just other things going on, but then this past year, started getting more involved, both in the Mises Caucus and in my local party, in my county. And I was actually asked to help moderate the Facebook page because they just needed more people to help out with that, mainly with so like my main job and focus within the Facebook group and social media as a whole is to help monitor the inflow of people who are asking to join the group. So I kind of, it's not like a free-for-all. If someone asks to join, they have to answer questions. Then we go through the list, we look at their questions, we look at their profile, look at all their associations, and decide, okay, does this person seem like they're a good fit for us? And it doesn't mean that we're we're trying to weed out trolls and also trying to weed out people that we think just aren't a good fit. That they're at the same time, we don't want libertarianism to just be a social club for people who are already libertarian. And this is where I think a lot of the controversies, like the things that you brought up, like one of the common themes of the criticisms of the Mises Caucus I get is like, you guys let a lot of people in or associate with a lot of people that like aren't libertarian on this point, or they say things that are kind of icky or that, we don't like on these things. And, listen, that's a tough balance. And I think every group, every, private entity has a right to set their own rules and guidelines for how they're going to try to recruit people. Everyone has their own sensitivities and stuff. I mean, listen, I'll say personally that I think racism is stupid, and I think it's usually vile and evil. At the same time, I have family members in both sides of my family, my father's and my mother, who like I wouldn't say are like racists, like they're evil, vile people, but they just have some prejudices and some views that they've grown up with, and you can't exactly disavow them of that, but they're also not like bad people that I think should be disassociated with. So, there's a lot of times I feel like the problem is like we've grown up in a culture that wants to view things around sexism and racism in these black and white ways, and it's not really that way to me. I think there's kind of a spectrum, and my main problem with racism, with sexism, with transphobia, with anything is, are you advocating for violence against a group of people? And if you are, well, that's a problem. That's a problem just because, because violence is bad. If you have incorrect or prejudiced or bigoted views about a group of people, but you aren't advocating for violence, well, that's a separate category. And I don't think that means that you need to be like publicly rebuked and shamed. I think that actually, I think doing that sometimes produces the counter effect. When you take all the racists and or people that have racist ideas and you publicly ridicule them, you kick them out of your groups, and you say, well, like you're just an evil, bigoted person, and like I can't believe you said that evil, bigoted thing, and like you need to go, and you do like what I would call like the virtue signaling thing, where you go then to your public accounts and say, oh, look what this person said, we publicly condemn that and all that. Like that makes us feel good, and it certainly does make the people who are like, let's say someone made a racist comment toward black people and we condemn that. Like that might make the people in the black community feel better, but I think what that does over the long haul is it takes all the people that have those bad ideas and lumps them in with other people that might have the same bad ideas or worse ideas, and then that's all they're hearing from. So now it's a tough balance. Like you don't want to do the opposite, where you just say, oh, well, we just think everyone's ideas are good and dandy and we have no problems with them at all. It's a hard line trying to walk, where you treat people as individuals and you don't just summarize them or define them by like their worst beliefs. But while at the same time, not wanting, like you don't want to encourage those things, but you don't want to, in my opinion, you don't want to cut off communication with people who like haven't let those bad ideas inspire them to violence. If they're coming to the Mises Caucus, if they're coming towards libertarianism, then like I want to encourage that. I want to get them around people that have, don't have those ideas, or that are, going to help surround them with a culture of people that are promoting voluntarism, promoting a stateless society or a minarchist society. I think that's a better solution. And listen, nothing's ever handled perfect. I'm sure we could sit here and go through a timeline of events, and there's probably going to be some things that could have been handled better, and that's just life. I think part of the problem too is that there's this weird hostility towards the Mises Caucus, in my opinion, where the conversations around the Mises Caucus are not of the majority of this nature. Like, it isn't just people who would say we're friends and we're sitting down and we're talking and just like bringing up like, hey, can you like, let's talk about this. Like, this was kind of weird. Let's see what happened. Like the 9 out of 10 times when I see someone bring up a complaint about the Mises Caucus, it doesn't come across as in good faith. It's like they already are convinced, well, this is a group of alt-right adjacent or alt-right, like actual alt-righters, that they're promoting entryism and they're bigoted and they're Nazis and transphobic and racist and this and that, and like they start out from that preconception, that belief they already have, and then they're just like, oh well, see, well, you condemn this? No, you won't, because you are bigoted. And it starts from this very nasty place of like, just, well, we're already convinced you're bad and you have to prove you're not. And that's just not a good way to go about like conversing with people. It's not like, if you want to talk about being good teammates, when you brought up division of labor, I agree. Like, we should all try to get along and work together on the things that we want to work together on, the things that we can work together on. And I'm not going to, like, yes, I'm part of the Mises Caucus. I'm also not going to be like an ignorant, idiot. Like, there are times where leadership in the caucus have done things that I personally disagreed with, that I personally said, maybe we're overreacting. Maybe, we're being too defensive. At the same time, I can understand where that overreaction, where that hyper defensiveness comes from. And it comes from like a constant, it is like a near constant in the people on social media who have this vendetta against the Mises Caucus. It's a near constant barrage of either directly attacking the caucus or making these posts and making the wink wink about like, well, there's a part of the party that believes X, Y, and Z, and it's just it's. I don't think I'm being dramatic. It's near constant. Like, every day on Twitter, I see, one of the usual suspects putting something out there. I don't sense from the majority of leadership in the Mises Caucus, the ones that I know personally and have talked to, that they're unwilling to talk about, unwilling to have conversations with people who identify themselves as allies and who want to have a conversation about something that they disagree with. But it's about how that's being done and where it's being done. If you reach out to Michael Heiss privately, or you reach out to me privately and you want to have a conversation, neither of us are going to turn away from that if, like, you're a friend of ours or you're coming in good faith. If you take to Twitter or Facebook, and you publicly call us out in this fashion that's like, look at this bad thing that you did, or look at this bad thing that somebody said, what are you going to do about it? I just don't think this is fostering a good path forward. It's not that I'm going to sit here and say, well, the Mises Caucus does everything perfect and, that's the end of the story. Like, listen, people do things all the time that are like, we're human, we're flawed. We make mistakes. People sometimes act defensively, they act irrationally. That's going to happen. But I see the Mises Caucus primarily as a bunch of people who I think have good intentions, who are under a lot of heat and are just acting defensively because that's human nature. I can't change human nature. I would love if, sometimes we did kind of like not take things so over the top, but that is the environment that I think has been created. And I don't think it's primarily the fault of the caucus. I think that there's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with the caucus for some other reasons we can get into that aren't things that I think are legitimate criticisms, and they can't really get them on these things, so they have to hyper focus on these couple of issues, and they're not trying to engage in good faith, I guess would be my summary.
All right. So apparently my mic was using the bad mic. I should sound a lot better now. Jordan, your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I should say, full disclosure, first off, I am actually a member of another caucus. I haven't really been hugely active with them, but I am a member of the Pragmatist Caucus. So I don't speak necessarily to represent them, but I do certainly believe very much so in their message. And really their core message in the Pragmatist Caucus is, let's get people into office and let's get people into, predominantly local races first and kind of start a snowball effect of trying to get sort of the national conversation started. And maybe to just refer a little bit to one of my favorite economists, Frederick Bastiat, he talks a lot about, in some of his writing, the concept of what he calls that which is seen and that which is unseen. And did I just completely lose you? No, I'm still here. Sorry, my monitors keep flashing. So as long as you don't tell me otherwise, I'll keep going, even though I can't see. But he really, in his writing, he talks a lot about the impact of in the law in particular, but in his work, that which is seen and that which is unseen, talking about what the intention is for something, in his case, about legislation versus what ends up actually happening. And, what is the actual end outcome of this action? And did it actually achieve what we intended it to, or was it counterintuitive? And, Bastiat's conclusion in the law is the law perverted, the law being used against the very ends of which it was conceived to perform. And I worry sometimes that there's a lot of unseen going on with the Mises Caucus, and we're just seeing, for instance, what they see as wins in terms of a bunch of new followers, say in some key people's Twitter accounts, or a bunch of new people signing up to donate to the caucus. But what's going unseen are potentially tenfold that amount of people who are being alienated from the LP because of that messaging. And so I might compare it to a situation that I think Hodey had shared in a prior episode, where he talked about a scenario where he kind of got people who had never even considered libertarianism and were kind of trapped in the false dichotomy of our two-party duopoly today. And he was talking to a lot of folks who were with the LGBTQ community, and they, were in the midst, I believe, of, DOMA and a lot of the Supreme Court rulings and whatnot that were going on. And his message of saying, hey, these guys say you can't get married. This side says you can, but we think the government shouldn't have a say at all. And that kind of perked up a bunch of people's ears and kind of, got into a new audience of people that would have never even considered libertarianism. And I think, right now, I tend to think that we're kind of in a position of we need to value more than anything getting butts in seats, and that's kind of something we talk about when we launch a new product, for instance, in the software world, is like at the very beginning, it's all about just getting people using it so you can start feedback loops and you can get information coming in and you can figure out how can we better, message to this new audience that we've just cracked into that we never thought we could crack into before. But you also have to be kind of careful with some of that too and figure out, is this an audience that we want to try to reach, or is this poisoning the well? And the other area that I would have to really express a lot of concern from what I've seen with the Mises Caucus, and I should clarify that there's a difference between what is in, say, the Mises Caucus's platform statements, and then what I seem to see by way of behavior on social media, and then behavior of sort of endorsements of others on social media, and things that they might be saying that aren't so inviting to other folks that might be wanting to potentially consider it. And so I think there's this kind of refrain that that the Mises Caucus can kind of retreat into sometimes, which is that, you guys are just call us racist all the time, so we're going to crank the edgelordism up to 11, and we're just going to be racist to trigger everybody. And yeah. And it seems like there's this, intention to trigger the libs more than advance the cause of liberty. And that would be very much the same critique I would levy against most of the supporters of Donald Trump, is that it was more about, hating and hurting the enemy than it was trying to advance themselves and society. And unfortunately, that I see that, and you might even call it or hark back. I remember, years ago. I would say both are kind of anathema in the libertarian movement at this point. But Chris Cantwell debated Jeffrey Tucker about brutalism versus, the mainstream libertarianism of more so embracing, some level of empathy for others. And I feel like the Mises Caucus has kind of grabbed the flag of brutalism and started running with that, of kind of saying, okay, hey, we're gonna be brutal and we're gonna cause a conversation. And the problem is, I worry that there's an opportunity cost to that conversation that's going unconsidered, that part that which is unseen, of all of these people that are witnessing this in silence from the sidelines, that had been considering potentially reaching out to somebody that had expressed views of liberty. But all of a sudden, that same person who expressed views of liberty, maybe that person expressed views of wanting to help small business owners. And this other person was a small business owner. And maybe that small business owner had lost faith in the government and they were really no longer, ready to listen to what Joe Biden had to say next. And we have, this prime person ready to hear the message of liberty, and they're starting to hear it and starting to come around. But then they see a post about something celebrating, a law in Missouri being passed to prevent transgender athletes from participating in school sports. And they see this person celebrating that. And this person, who's witnessing from the sidelines happens to have a child or a niece or nephew that is, having the similar challenges. And they now all of a sudden instantly lose all respect for that person who's now, trying to put out this message of liberty, but they've inadvertently now tainted that, and they never even know, because they've completely killed that opportunity on the vine. And that's, I think, the saddest part of all of this that worries me. And it really worries me with, if you think about what, say, the Pragmatist Caucus is doing. The Pragmatist Caucus, first and foremost, is let's fight for things like ballot access. What's the very base most thing that libertarians need to do to be a party? Well, we got to show up on ballots. So they fight for that. They fight for then making sure that people are supported in small races in.
Did Jordan cut out for you, Jacob? Oh. Unmute yourself, Jordan. I think you're back. Say hello, Jordan. Oh, I'm not sure if he can hear me. I can see him. Oh, unmute yourself and then try talking. Let me see if I can unmute him. Oh, can't unmute your guests because they refuse to mute themselves. All right, well, I'm going to let Jordan finish when he gets back. Here's the thing. Well, okay, so Jacob, I guess you're the natural guy to respond to some of the things that Jordan said there. Go ahead.
Sure, and I trying to figure out the best way to respond to this. So, can sometimes the Mises Caucus put out a message that might turn off some people? I mean, I guess it's possible. At the same time, are we not? Isn't the opposite true, is what my thought is. I mean, if the Pragmatist Caucus or the Audacious Caucus or some other libertarian figure puts out something that is kind of appealing to what I would refer to more as the leftist or SJW kind of woke crowd, is that not going to turn off maybe a small business owner who was really Donald Trump didn't do anything for me. The Republican Party's kind of a joke. Maybe I really need to start considering libertarianism. And then, they see something from, Jorgensen, we must be actively anti-racist, and then that turns them off. So there's always opportunity cost. I mean, there's always, if you try to pander to one side, yes, you will probably turn off the other side. And I think what the Mises Caucus is saying is, well, everyone in the Mises Caucus tends to agree with is that we really don't like a lot of the kind of more socially progressive, or what's sometimes called the culturally Marxist, we don't really like that stuff, and we don't like when the Libertarian Party is flirting with that stuff. Nor do we like when it's flirting with Donald Trump or being a bunch of bootlickers. We just put out a couple posts over the past few days about the ongoing thing with Kavanaugh and not Kavanaugh, with the what's the officer's name that killed George Floyd?
Derek Chauvin.
Yeah, Chauvin. I don't know why Kavanaugh came to my head. But with
Freudian slip.
Right. But yeah, and then we had a couple of disgruntled people commenting on our post being like, "Oh, I guess you guys are just a bunch of communists and Marxists now because you're saying the same stuff the left does about the cops." And we were just, it's just silly. Like anytime you put a message out, I mean, isn't that kind of like the basics of economics? At least from the Austrian perspective, is that like whenever humans act, you are giving up, to act, you are giving up the opportunity to do other things, to do the thing that you're doing. Like you form a value hierarchy and you say, well, I view this as being more important than all these other things, and so I'm going to act in the pursuit of this, and in the pursuit of this of what I want to gain. So, there's no way we can appeal to everybody. And while I mean, I would, I don't want the Mises Caucus or libertarians to be out there saying things that are like blatantly attacking trans people, of course. If there's people that don't listen, there are people who see like the inclusion of transgender people in sports as a negative, and that's a conversation. I mean, there's I've looked into this a little bit. I personally think there's a way you could include transgender people in sports. You'd have to restructure everything a little bit. I think there's a way to do it. I don't think it'd be bad to do it, but I can understand and I empathize a lot with the people who are concerned about it. That's not something that I think there's an obvious right answer to. Other than that, I think the libertarians should say, well, the state just shouldn't be involved in it, and I think private entities have the right to decide for themselves how they're going to operate.
Sure.
And we should try, we should do our best, I think, not to overly cater to one side or the other. I don't think the Mises Caucus should just bend over and just say everything to appease the Trump crowd or anything. We don't. We do sometimes say things that might be more appealing to people who aren't socially progressive, but we at the same time, there's a lot in our platform that if someone's not, if someone's really deep into the Trump crowd, they're really not going to be comfortable in the caucus long term, and that's played out many times. People that they come in maybe because and listen, if we can appeal to someone in the Trump crowd and bring them towards liberty, to me that's a win. Anyone we can bring towards liberty is a win. But we have to, we can't be tone deaf to the fact that there's a culture war, and I don't think that we should pick sides on the culture war. But at the same time,
so
there are people.
I gotta ask you a question. You a question, Jacob. So let's look at the math. LGBTQ people, under 10% of the general population. Trans people, really small percentage of the population. Yes, we're having, some conversations about it. But as Andy Craig, who's a member of the Pragmatist Caucus, who I really appreciate a lot and really appreciate what he authors, one of the things that he kind of called out is he's like, I was reading Human Action the other night, and I read a lot about, marginal utility and things like that. But I must have missed the parts about, keeping all of the trans people out of sports and whatnot. And it just seems like for a caucus that calls itself the Mises Caucus, which I have to admit I have a problem with, because I think the caucus is misrepresenting a man who I hold in great esteem. I consider him one of my own personal heroes. I went to college at the college that hosts his personal library. I got to sit amongst his personal effects, sit at his desk, read his personal library. I own a copy of his wife's book, My Time with Lou, that was signed by her, which is awesome, Margaret von Mises. And to see some of the things that get associated with his name, I have to imagine he would have a problem with. This is a man who was an Austrian Jew who fled Nazi persecution to the United States. And if we had the system of immigration in place now that then I should say that we have now, he might not have been allowed in. And it seems like the Mises Caucus wants to have this preoccupation with cultural Marxism, and that this idea of fixating on these others that are coming in and challenging our long-standing way of life, and the sort of crap you see Gab.com post on Twitter, and their stupid Aryan nation worshiping sort of visuals. it just seems like, why the preoccupation with this stuff? Like, you have the whole plank to it. Why not the military industrial complex? Why not go after the Federal Reserve? Why not go after, and
we do.
You may say that, but that's not where all of this conversation is going. And there's this weird courting of the Hotep movement, known anti-Semites, and this inability to disavow them, like Angela McArdle coming out and getting asked, like, what do you think of this person saying that the Jews run Hollywood? And she's saying, oh, well, people should be able to ask questions. People should be able to ask questions. And like what Hodey always says is, yeah, it's fine to ask the questions, but after a while, if you don't listen to the answers and actually assess like the actual data in front of you, and that's not a good faith asking of that question any longer. So I just got to ask you, Jacob, why the preoccupation? And I got to say, like, I see everything of what people latch onto and whatnot. There just doesn't seem to be any activity around anything else. If there's other stuff going on, if you're trying to get candidates into office other than just internal LP positions, I'd love to know about it. But all I ever see is just tearing down people in marginalized groups and alienating people out of the LP in general. So why?
Okay, I don't say this to be offensive to you. I don't know you personally, but I just think that that's a disingenuous statement to say that our focus is owning the libs and cultural Marxism. I mean, that's nothing we do except like in response to people who are like criticizing us, I would say, is really focused on that. Like, we're out there, and the things that we talk about the loudest are the military industrial complex, are the wars that are going on overseas. We had like 4 or 5 posts over the past day from the Libertarian Mises Caucus Facebook page talking about the ongoing like police brutality problem. And
so that's fine, but why go out of your way to troll other people and like the anti-racist messaging? Why go out of your way to tear that down rather than just the division of labor thing?
It's not going out of our way. It's that people are coming to us and saying, why aren't you this way? And we're saying, because we don't like that. And yeah, I don't like the cultural Marxist stuff. I don't like the SJW. Listen, it didn't make
Where is violence involved in those equations, though?
You're allowed to you're allowed to dislike things even if they're not like.
Oh, I know.
Listen, something can be harmful to society without it being like inherently a call to violence. Like I just think that's a kind of a silly question.
So it's interesting you say that, because earlier you said something about the effect of, it's okay to say anything you want so long as you don't call for violence. But you just kind of made the point that.
I did not say anything's okay as long as you're not calling for violence. It's not what I said. What I said was, my main focus is if someone's calling for violence, that's bad, that needs condemned. If someone has bad ideas but they're not calling for violence, then while I still disagree with those bad ideas, that's not a person I'm going to come out and like target them and attack them in the way that you guys want us to attack people. Like, you guys see someone that says something like politically incorrect or something that might be mildly racist, but they're not calling for violence, and you guys want us to do what you guys do and to go out and say, well, we publicly condemn this and we're anti-racist and all that, and like, you want us to engage in these word games, engage in the same kind of virtue signaling that the left, that the SJW stuff that they do, and that's not what we're about. That's not how we engage.
So you have
the world.
Selective. One of the things I wanted to kind of ask you about was, I understand this idea of condemning performative call-outs, but when you talk about things in a public sphere, you have to be ready to be called out publicly. If you make a statement, you have to be in a public, area. You have to be ready to have that conversation publicly.
People aren't primarily coming to the caucus and condemning us for things that the caucus publicly says. It's disingenuous people like in the Faketarians group who have their sock accounts everywhere, or that are monitoring just followers on Twitter and look at the thing that this person said and blasting that for everyone to see.
Well, these are individual members who represent your caucus.
First of all, not everybody who is in the Facebook group is an actual vetted member of the caucus. We let people into the caucus group all the time that are just like, we want to learn more. And if we
Well,
think
and
they're
I'm
there
not
in good
necessarily
faith, we let
saying
them,
that.
we let them
So
in. We have onboarding processes. Like I'm part of the process in my state of PA where we vet people and we invite them to join like we do it twice a week. We have a Zoom call for onboarding where we like to talk to people and get to know them personally and vet them before we actually add them to our list of official members.
Sure.
Just because there are people on Twitter or Facebook who follow us or that are maybe in the group, that doesn't mean that they represent us. And the problem is this just disingenuous, bad faith focus on on just like finding all the bad things that you can find. And listen, the internet's a cesspool. Like and we are all part timers. Like
And
Mises
is the
Caucus,
8chan of the libertarian movement. That's what I would. That's
Okay.
what you guys are.
You can say that. Listen, we're a bunch of part-timers. Libertarian Mises Caucus is not a group, right? I mean, now we're talking about changing this, but right now there's no full-time paid staff. We're a bunch of people with full-time jobs and families and lives. Our focus is not to patrol our groups and Twitter feeds for people that say mean things. I'm sorry. That is
Well, I
not a
question
good
whether
use of our
Josh
time.
Smith has a job or he's just bilking you all, but I'll put that aside for now.
All right,
Okay,
so
Hodey, you cop in.
all right, let me go here a little bit. Here's my thing, Jacob, because I understand what you're saying, and not everything's, you can't, you get big, you let everybody in the Facebook group, you see certain things. I don't see the caucus, right? I see the people that have the Mises flag, and I'm just like, okay, I guess this person associates with you. You know what I mean? And if they got a white hood on, then it's like, okay, I guess anybody can do it, right? That's not really your fault because anybody can put a Mises flat banner on their photo.
We've asked
right?
people to take our badge off their profile when they've like given us like when they're saying things and like, no, like, why are you saying that? You're not even part of our group anymore. We kicked you out. Take that badge off and stop saying these things.
Right,
but,
right.
Like,
Yeah.
There's not, but like it's that like we've asked them to. They don't.
Right.
What are we gonna do?
You do. So
Like,
I get that.
so-
Now, here's my thing, because he's saying, like, and I think this is kind of maybe the crux of what Jordan is kind of getting at, because you can get kicked from the Mises Caucus Facebook group if you make an open borders post. I've seen it happen before. You make the post in the group, you get kicked out of the group. They're like, hey, that's it, Paul. You knew that rule going in. You're gone. You know what I mean?
They
Whereas
pick and choose their ideological
whereas if you
purity
make a
and when
reference,
to
for
be.
example, somebody says, imagine caring about trans rights, quote, or some shit, unquote, and that's Dave Smith, his post is still up, and he's, of course, not kicked from the caucus.
We've had two posts in the group over the past week that were pro-trans rights that weren't removed.
Okay, and so like I'm saying, this isn't like 100% thing, but what I'm talking about is like the optics of that. When you just say like, man, I just posted an open borders thing that got deleted immediately. It divided, and the ones that don't get deleted get like a bunch of pushback. And oh, here's my messages from the guy who didn't delete it, who said like, hey, watch it with that. I don't want too much of this in the group. Whereas somebody says like trans rights or some shit, and that still stays up, and you're just kind of like, it doesn't feel right.
Can I explain why we remove that stuff?
Yeah.
A lot of the time, because I mean, a lot of first of all, we'll probably most of the time not let because we put most people on post approval, and for the most part, we don't want the conversation within the caucus groups to be about borders or trans rights or cultural Marxism or any of this stuff. Like, that's
How is borders
focus.
not a legitimate issue to talk about, though? That blows my mind. But go
That's
on.
Austrian to the core, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me finish what I was saying,
Sure.
and then I'll hop to that. Or I guess I can explain it in my answer. So the caucus has a platform, and listen, you can't when you act in the world, like I said earlier, you create a hierarchy of values, and you say here are the things that we think are the most important to act on. We can't do everything. We have to prioritize. I would put money on this. At least 60 to 70% of people within the Mises Caucus are open borders in terms of their preferences.
I'd agree.
But that's not the focus of the caucus because we can't focus on everything. We focus mainly on
Then
the
what
wars.
is your focus?
Okay. Well, have you looked through our platform before?
I have, but what is it? What is the outcome?
Our
that you're looking to
focus
achieve?
is the Federal Reserve. Our focus is the wars. Our focus is the war on drugs, on police reform, on
And
criminal
how
justice
do you
reform,
intend to address any of those? How?
Okay. Well, that's I mean, I can't give you a 10-second answer to that. Like, there's a whole strategy we have.
Have
you ever asked these questions in good faith, not in a debate where you're coming in just like, well, you guys are just a bunch of people who are. Like,
actually.
Okay.
But the thing is, it just doesn't seem like there's ever any concrete plans other than shit posting. I'm going to shit post. I'm going to get people to follow me.
Our plan is to be the caucus that raises the most money to support candidates. First of all,
okay.
That's one of the parts of our plan.
How much money have you given into which candidates?
I don't have those figures in front of me.
Do you have a ballpark?
Last time I looked at the numbers, so like I think over a 2-year period we raised over $13,000, and
okay,
a lot of
that's commendable.
A lot of that went now. Like some of that goes to like the messaging,
Josh Smith,
the website. Yeah. No, not really a lot to Josh Smith. I mean, some to Josh Smith because he was a candidate running internally. Mm-hmm. We did give him some money. I believe that's on the. You can look all this stuff up, by the way. Like this is all like we're a caucus. Like you can.
I was gonna say I saw an Excel sheet of it.
It's all. I'm forgetting the.
Stu, are you Are you 990? Do you file a publicly inspectable nonprofit return then?
I don't know about our
11, or it might be a political organization.
I forget I don't have it. It's like I'm just having a brain fart. But like any caucus that raises money, there's a site you can go online and basically see all the money coming in. You can see all the disbursements. It's all labeled. It's all there for people to see. And I used that to. Last time I got on there was to debunk the claim that Heist was taking $3,000 out every 2 months, which is just false. Like you can go see it. This is public data. He took $3,000 out once because he furloughed his payroll for 6 months while we were in election season and we were focusing on giving money to candidates. And then at the very end of 2020, him and other people got paid what they hadn't been getting paid for a few months because our focus was on funding candidates. And we have funded a fair amount of candidates. I mean, we've been a growing caucus, and not 100% of the money goes towards candidates right now, but it's a fair bit. It's like, I want to say last I checked, it was probably in the neighborhood of like 30 to 50%, somewhere in that neighborhood.
But
and we've even given money to candidates that weren't like pro Mises. We've given money to candidates that we didn't agree completely on. You know what? Do you remember that our preferred candidate for the nomination for the Libertarian presidential nominee was Jacob Hornberger? By the way, that guy is like overtly open borders. Like
there's a great commercial he had. If you haven't seen the Jacob Hornberger like open borders commercial, you should check that out. It's very good.
Right, but I'm just like if we're a bunch of like a bunch of alt-righters trying to appease like Trump supporters, like Jacob Hornberger was the worst choice of someone for us to endorse and try to get nominated. Like it's just
and I want to acknowledge my own sort of bias in this. Like I'm going off what I see people talking about on Facebook and what I see them supporting. I think, again, my anecdotal perspective, though, is I have never seen a Mises Caucus member advocate for anyone other than an internal race, meaning the chair for the LNC or, an at-large position. I've never seen them actually run for a position in local or state government.
It happens all the time. I mean, maybe it's not like something that gets publicly put out there on the public Libertarian Mises Caucus page that often, but like in our private groups, a lot of times people will come, and we also have state groups, and people. So that speaks to
the preoccupation, though, with other topics other than getting these people in office.
But everything has a different purpose. The purpose of the Facebook page that goes out there and puts out messages isn't to raise awareness about candidates. It's to put out the messaging of the caucus. But like internally, we are promoting the campaigns of different people that we're supporting and asking for people to donate and stuff. I mean, we do that plenty. I mean, I just feel like and like, listen, my point is not that everything the caucus does is perfect and there's never room for criticism. Like there's always room for criticism and growth, but 90% of that is not coming from people coming at us in good faith. It's like people coming at us in this combative attitude, starting out with they're already convinced, like, well, you guys are just a bunch of alt-right like Nazis, and you're trying to flood them into the party, and you're trying to like they just think all these nasty things about us. And like, now that creates, so back to when you asked, why are these posts deleted? Sometimes we delete or we block posts about open borders or trans rights or this or that, because it's just, well, that's not the focus of the caucus. And then sometimes that stuff is taken down. Because,
but then you let Dave Smith put his stuff up and keep it on, right? That was Hodey's point earlier. When he says something that's potentially inflammatory and completely outside the scope of what you want to focus on, it's cool to leave his up though. And that's where there's inconsistencies.
I can't remember anything inflammatory that Dave Smith has really posted.
What was it? What was the quote? Trans rights and shit?
With the wars going on, who cares about trans rights or some shit?
Okay.
Now that's his Twitter post. That wasn't a Facebook caucus thing.
Sure.
But we have no control over what Dave says on Twitter. And
I want to be consistent in that.
But it's different from saying like, I think for me, here's what it is. It's saying I have no control over that versus when I post something, even if let's not talk about Mises at all. When I post something about open borders, I'm going to get at least 5 Mises Caucus people to say like, what is this cultural Marxist shit? And
they go out of their way.
And I'm just like, bro, I don't even know what to tell you right now. Like, I can go so Austrian on your ass about open borders. That is literally why Hayek left socialism, because Mises convinced him that open borders is an awful practice and it is required for capitalism. Number 2 on your plank is Austrian economics, right? And that's number 2. Yeah. Okay. So when we're talking about things that you do focus on, right, with as far as importance goes, capitalism requires the free movement of people. It's baseline principle. I mean, we're chapter 1 type thing requires the free movement of people so that you can have division of labor. And so when I see something like borders get deleted and they're like, yeah, it's cultural Marxism. I'm like, no, it's capitalism 101. Like this is why is open borders and you even said it yourself on the show. Why does that strike you as cultural Marxism then, as opposed to Austrian economics? Like why doesn't it?
I agree with you that if a person now, I mean, I can understand.
I know where you're going to go. I'll tell you afterwards, but okay.
I can understand the mindset of maybe some more right-wing libertarians where like they've only ever heard the open borders argument from the people who also put out the cultural Marxist stuff. So they've made an incorrect conflation of those two things in their mind. I would have a conversation with them and be like, no, listen, actually, here are some good, strong economic arguments, from Hayek or from guys like Brian Kaplan for why open borders are actually good. But like, listen again, but there's going to be people in the caucus that have views on immigration that I personally don't agree with. And maybe you put out a post out there and they attack you for it. Okay. What do you want the caucus to do about that? What do you want me to do about that?
Promote a culture that's inclusive.
Rebrand. Take Mises off of it. That's what you can do for me, and I'll stop talking about it.
If people who follow this podcast, who follow the We're Libertarians podcast, like we have a bunch of different people. We have libertarian socialists, ANCAPs, centrists, minarchists.
I get that. Listen, I like diversity of opinion when it's like a podcast platform like this, but we are a political caucus that's saying, listen, we can't make every issue our issue. We picked, a handful of things and say, these are where we're going to focus. And it's not that we've never talked about immigration. We've criticized how immigration is done. Like we've criticized ICE. We've criticized the Department of Homeland Security. We've criticized the border wall. But we also have to remember that the immigration. Now, listen, I'm an open borders person, so like I'm going to preface that because otherwise, what I'm about to say, you could run away with and misconstrue. Immigration is a tricky issue, and I think that there's room for good faith disagreement on how borders get dealt with. I mean, first of all, you have the divide between anarchists and minarchists. And if you're a minarchist, like an anarchist is going to say abolish political borders, and the minarchist is just going to say, well, have them, but like have as free movement as possible. And then there's different levels of like how open or closed they are. Like you can have like an Ellis Island kind of situation, or you can have just totally closed, or you can have letting people in but just checking if they have any wanted criminal things associated with that person's name or face or whatever. I mean, there's so many ways to do immigration, and it's just not a subject that we as a caucus are going to say, if you don't agree with us 100% across the line on this position on the borders, that you can't be part of the caucus, you can't be associated with us, you can't work with us on these other 5 things that if you do agree with us on, well, let's work towards those. If another caucus wants to form and you guys want to have a different set of priorities, go do that. Like if you don't like that the Mises Caucus doesn't focus on borders, how about you go create a caucus that focuses on borders instead of spending all your time blasting the Mises Caucus? That seems way more productive.
So I think what Hodey and I are trying to get across is that some of those points you're attempting to make are mutually exclusive with closed borders. So I think what we're trying to point out is you're trying to divorce something that cannot be divorced. As I believe it was Mises, it might have been Hayek said that freedom is the combination of all freedoms, not just, one variety of freedom, whether that's social or financial or monetary. It's the combination of all freedoms. And I think what you folks, being members of the Mises Caucus at large, tend to fail to see, again, that which is unseen, is that people looking at you from the outside, you made the comment earlier that first and foremost, you want to treat people as individuals. People looking from the outside right now and looking at comments that you folks make disparaging trans rights, disparaging other things like that, they don't see you treating people as individuals. They don't even see you treating them as people. That is the core problem here, is that there's a dehumanizing language that the Mises Caucus tends to retreat to, where they say, oh, no, that's not our business. Leave that to the other people who care about those things. We're talking about human rights here. I mean, this is not, and you can say, oh, there's already laws, to protect people. Anybody who knows, I have a BA in history, so I studied American and European history quite extensively. And if you look back at the history of America, you do not see people enjoying rights equally throughout various parts of the country. Once Northern soldiers left the South, that's when de facto Jim Crow went into effect until it became, facto by law, codified later. And those people did not enjoy the rights that we would have thought they should have via the Constitution.
That was wrong, and the Mises Caucus would oppose that. If Jim Crow existed today, the Mises Caucus would be very loudly opposing that.
But what I'm saying is there's
politics.
What you label as identity politics. The vast majority of the Overton window of public discourse would say what you are saying is an identity politics issue is actually dehumanizing language. And you guys can say all you want that's identity politics, but the Overton window and the vast majority of Americans say, no, you need to have a baseline recognition that there are some people that have been traditionally screwed over by our justice system, which I think we should all be able to agree is not very just in how it operates today.
Absolutely.
So why the hell should we think that those people would have received just treatment in the past? And why shouldn't we be looking out for ways in which the state, the big evil that we should all be fighting against, is coming down harder on them than they are other people? Why the hell are we defaulting to the side of the state? Because that is the implicit argument that people are making when they come and they rail against things like trans rights and whatnot. You're saying, wait a minute, I kind of like how the cops have been beating you up all the time. I don't really care, and I don't want to get into that. And it becomes this sort of weasel way to get out of stuff. And the biggest example of this happening in the party, and what I'm so scared about with all this talk of the takeover and all that sort of stuff, is back in 2004, prior to 2004, the convention that year, the wording in support of open borders was explicitly clear in the actual bylaw, or in the planks of the LP. And it was in that year that they decided they wanted to gut all the planks and then attempt to bring in the paleos and bring in a bunch of other, audience members that they didn't think they were potentially reaching out to before. And they added a weasel word into the plank, which was that we don't support any unreasonable measures to prevent people from crossing the border. And with that one word, they opened up a can of worms that basically allowed anybody to come in and say that person doesn't deserve to cross the line. And that's why I think I find it, I'm speaking as somebody who is the grandson of 3 out of 4 immigrants who came, into this country within the past 60 years. So it's something that is very close to me, but you know what? We're both white. We came from Europe. We had a big advantage in our grandparents getting in.
Jewish, but I mean,
well, you pass as white, and that's the reality of it.
I pass as white.
And
okay.
Man, it's something that I don't know. It's hard because obviously I'm not
Jewish enough that Hitler would have killed me. So I mean, that's
But at the some border agent though, to some border agent, you're white. And at the end of the day, though, that I think my major problem, and again, it stems to the fact that you brand yourselves as Mises and use his name to proclaim these statements, but I think that the complete unwillingness to speak against ills of the state, against marginalized people who can be shown through clear data that they've been marginalized and particularly abused by the state. The fact that you can't come out and clearly disavow them, like that people like Angela can't say, no, that was wrong to say that the Jews run Hollywood, or to say that, no, that was wrong that Hotep Jesus said whatever, about the Jews. It's something where it means a lot more to everybody else outside the party and who we can potentially bring in. And unfortunately, I just worry that there's a lot of messaging that's poisoning the well, and it might be, kind of shoring down and trying to bring in people like us. But the problem is people like us, if that's the only target audience, we ain't going to win in the long term. And we need to embrace that fact and realize that the way that we're going to win and get the message of liberty is by getting it to every tribe, getting it to every single variety of person we can possibly do. And unfortunately, I just feel like if we continue playing this game of not coming out and saying, no, that person should not be allowed to be abused by the state like that. And yes, maybe we should have some laws that make sure the state doesn't exercise in more abuse or allowance of abuse, then I don't see the problem with that. And if that is going to be something that allows us to move forward in a unified way. But I don't know. That's kind of where I come from.
I'm going to give you the very last word on this. It's just before we move into the piece of my mind segment, because we're a little over time. But that was a long thing, and you deserve a chance to respond. I did want to throw in with Jordan, just while you're responding to everything. I did want to fit in there that my thing with what they call cultural Marxism. First of all, look up cultural Marxism. Not you. I'm sure you have, Jacob, but anybody listening, look it up. It is a fictitious word. It is made by people who really don't like social progression stuff, and they try to link it to communism. That is a really lame thing, because I really, among all of the economists that I've read, Marx is perhaps the most reprehensible. He's very open with his murder. He's very open with, yes, this is what we do to minorities. He was very
Machiavellian. Yeah.
Right. And it's funny how you talk, that's funny that SJW stuff gets linked to Marx, because he loved systems and languages that oppressed minority individuals. Now, sometimes that minority maybe controlled the disproportionate amount of things, but he loved language that, to use language and use these implicit systems that repressed people that he wanted to repress, and so I think for me, I think it's funny because being a student of history, and Jordan, I know you actually have the education to back it up. I just enjoy history. I'll call myself a history enthusiast, I guess, not a master. But being somebody who loves history, I see these things and I just kind of say, like, why am I getting called a cultural Marxist? Again, and Jacob, I feel bad that you have to respond for all these people because you're not part of the problem. But we get, for me, like I said, it's a thing that I can count on people from the Mises Caucus having a problem when there's a bill that says, hey, let's forbid the free market from giving trans people any health care at all. I can count on me saying something bad about it and the Mises Caucus saying something bad about me and relating it to cultural Marxism. And I shouldn't say the Mises Caucus. Individuals that are affiliated, that like to call themselves affiliated with the Mises Caucus, right? And for me, it's that culture. Because where I was going with the We're Libertarians thing, because you are correct. This is a podcast. You're a caucus. You guys have your focuses. We have our focuses. It's a totally different thing. I understand. It's not beasts that we can compare. But we have had to do we do proactive damage control. And what this isn't is just, did you delete enough posts? Because I think that's what the outrage people want. Did you delete all these things? Did you get rid of all these things? I think for me, the culture that I'm searching for is more of an embrace of being like, man, I am celebrating trans rights. I celebrate individualism. I celebrate diversity. I really enjoy it.
But like,
all right, go ahead. That's all I had.
The problem is a lot of these things are just divisive, and like, I'm not trying to call you tone deaf, Hodey, but I think that it is a little like, we have to understand there's a cultural divide in our society. Like, not everybody embraces what you would call trans rights. Like, there's a lot of people in our society that have a different view on the like subject of transgenderism, and that's a large portion of society. I kind of find myself in the middle of both extremes, to be honest. Like, I mean, I use trans people's pronouns, and I treat trans people with respect, and I really, like, I don't go through life thinking about, like, what trans people do. Like, it doesn't cross my mind.
It's not a middle ground. That's the right thing to do. You're a good man. Yeah.
At the same time, like, I think a lot of people who go out there, like, performing activism for what you call trans rights, they A, go about it in really counterproductive, toxic ways, and B, a lot of their rhetoric I don't agree with. And then on the other side, there's people that have concerns because they have different beliefs, often maybe influenced by religion, and we have to like, as much as we should respect trans people and their beliefs, we have to also respect that people, you know, have religious beliefs that might come in conflict with that. And it's tough. Like, the culture wars is a thing that's going on, and we can't be tone deaf to it. I don't think we should pick a side, but I think the problem is, like, I think the Mises Caucus doesn't pick a side as much as maybe its critics say that we do. But I think the problem is, like, we just aren't willing to demonize a whole group of people on one side of it that I feel like a lot of people, I'm not saying necessarily either you, Hodey, or you, Jordan. I don't know you that well, Jordan, but I've never seen this from Hodey. But I feel like a lot of people on the more, and I agree, cultural Marxism is kind of a dumb term. It's hard to come up with like a precise all-inclusive
It's like feminazi.
word.
We wanted to make it, guys. Thanks for coming in. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. But I lost my train of thought now. But there's a lot of people on that side of the aisle that, like, if you just don't agree with them, then, like, you're a bigot, you're a bad person, and, you know, they aren't willing to agree to disagree. And while there's toxicity on both sides, there's people on the right associated with or not associated with Mises who have said some things that I find just to be in bad taste, to be rude, to be even vulgar at times. I see a lot of people wanting to focus on that and demonize us for it, but not a lot going the other direction. And I see, in my opinion, I see more people on the right side of the aisle of the culture war who say, like, well, why can't we just agree to disagree? Like, I don't have to, like, listen, there are like conservative Christians who just want to say, listen, I don't think that a person who was born biologically a man who says that, they experience gender dysphoria and then they want to undergo some transition, or they want to identify as a woman in their personhood trapped in a man's body, and then cultural conservatives say not trying to demonize the person, but they don't agree with that. They don't see it the same way. Those people get demonized. At the same time, like, me as I know you're a Christian too, Hodey. Like, I believe I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. Okay. People who don't believe in Jesus, who think that I'm wrong, they are implicitly saying that on some level I'm delusional, or that I'm on some level in my mind I am believing a lie. And it's like, now, like, does sometimes people criticizing Christianity, does that like make me uncomfortable? Does that upset me? Absolutely. But we have to be willing to understand that not everybody is going to have the same, and this is where the Mises Caucus, I think, is absolutely right in their plank on lifestyle choices. We say, listen, as long as you aren't advocating for violence or statism, like, we really don't care. And listen, there are trans people and gay people and people of all stripes and colors in our caucus. I don't think the divide of the Mises Caucus versus the rest of the party is the Mises Caucus is a bunch of right-wing paleos who are trying to own the libs and everybody else. I don't see that. What I see is a lot of people who are united on prioritizing certain issues and prioritizing we didn't get into strategy much, but there's a specific strategy that the Mises Caucus is promoting. There's a lot of people outside the Mises Caucus that look at what we're prioritizing in our message and what our strategy is, and they don't like that, and they disagree with that. So there's a massive disagreement on those lines, and then this culture war stuff gets overlaid on top of that. And that's the way I see things. I'm not going to say that everybody in Mises Caucus leadership has always handled things right. Listen, I went and I'll say this publicly, I went and talked to Angela McArdle privately after that Q&A and said, and I went to everyone in the Mises Caucus leadership team and said, I don't really think that was like the best way to answer those questions. And like, listen, I have said this publicly. I think sometimes, like, I think that we are unfairly criticized and attacked a lot. And I think that's made us a lot of people hyper defensive and unwilling to acknowledge criticisms. Do I like that? No. Is that human nature and just natural when you have a group that's like constantly under attack by what I think is bad faith accusations and attacks? It's kind of natural. And I try to pump the brakes a little bit and be kind of a voice of reason to be like, and listen, now we probably disagree a little bit on the Hotep stuff. I don't like everything Hotep's ever said. I think he's said things that are blatantly anti-Semitic and that I don't like. I also think he's trending towards our side, and I want to encourage that. And like, again, this is what I talked about earlier. How do we engage with people who have bad beliefs? I don't think the answer is gatekeeping and ostracizing them and kicking them to the curb. Now, can you say that maybe you can go too far the other direction?
But would you say that about communists? You don't do that with communists. You do kick them to the curb. If there are communists that are trending towards, like, if an ex-communist came and said, I read Man, Economy, and the State or A New Liberty, and now I am identifying as an anarcho-capitalist, but they maybe have some lingering, like, bad ideas from their communist days, I'm going to want to invite them in and be friends with them and try to encourage them to keep going down that journey and embracing better and better ideas. And there's no perfect way to go about this. Life is messy sometimes. And when you're trying to engage, like, it's easy when you're playing like within libertarianism, like, we can just be open and say what, like, just, lay it all on the line. But we're trying to bring people, like, listen, we have to understand, we're radicals, okay? Libertarianism, compared to the rest of the world, we are a radical movement. We are a radical ideology, okay? We believe that on every level of society, that interactions between individuals should be completely voluntary, and all coercion, all systems of coercion should be removed, and that people should engage in voluntarism. That is directly flying in the face of the structures in our society today. And we have to realize that, like, we have to engage with a lot of people that are coming from different backgrounds, both economically and socially. And we can easily change, I think, through argumentation and good faith discussions, people's economic views and their views of political systems. But it's not but like, we can't bring the culture war into this. If you want the Libertarian Party to be all left, like, okay, but like, if there's people that agree with you on economics and the political status of the state, but they have completely different cultural views, if you're willing to agree to disagree, to put those disagreements to the side and work towards common goals, you're not going to find enemies. I mean, listen, you might find the oddball person who is disgruntled or says mean things on Twitter. That's always going to happen. But the general trend, the overall majority of the people in Mises, you're not going to find an enemy with. That's my bottom line.
Well, thank you both for your thoughts on that. I do appreciate it. I know we went a little overtime, but I feel like that's a subject, if any subject deserves it, that's probably one that deserves a little extra focus here. We're going to get to the piece of my mind segment. I will once again lead because I'm a me first guy. What can I say? So mine's pretty quick, thankfully, because I know we got to shorten things up a little bit. So just recently, I mean, after Biden appointed a Raytheon CEO to lead up the Defense Department, of course, the next appointment looks to be this guy named David Chipman, and for the ATF. Now, it's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Libertarians are going to hate this department no matter what. Okay, so like, there's no redeeming it. It's like having like the Nazi branch of the government. You're just like, okay, well, obviously we hate that, right? There's no way this is going to be a good thing. So he's automatically not in a good place. But David Chipman, I would have a tough time making a worse selection than Chipman. And I feel like it's one of those, while I accept a lot of opinions, I feel like this is one you can almost prove. Now, he's been working, obviously, as a libertarian. So he's anti-gun. He's been working at for Giffords, the senior policy group. He's been a senior policy advisor for the Giffords. Giffords is a group named after Gabrielle Giffords, who, of course, was wounded in a shooting. And I understand, like, okay, that's your opinion. You know, you want like harsher gun control. The more important thing is this guy was part of the Waco raid when he was with the FBI. Now, he's been with the FBI for 25 years. There's just factually been no bigger disaster I guess I can't say factually because they've been meddling in other nations too, but at least locally, there's no bigger disaster that the FBI has done, I guess, publicly than Waco. I mean, it was mishandled all around. He was actually part of a team, and I had to look this up, but when obviously when they murdered a bunch of women and children, before saying it was an accident, they went around saying they had to do it. And they went about demonizing some of them by saying they were shooting down their helicopters. Now, it is true that their helicopters were shot at, but he made an emphasis to say they were shot down, which was a verifiable lie. And it spurned public, the public against these. He basically took to the war of public opinion. So what we have is somebody who engages in propaganda whenever they think he's wrong, whenever somebody thinks he's done something wrong, as opposed to takes accountability, and that person is nominated. Biden doesn't get to make the selection. It does have to be a nomination, but they got 51 votes, so we'll see what happens. But he is tabbed as the nominee to lead the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. All I can say is it's bad. It's time to come around. If you're holding out on Joe Biden, maybe doing the right thing here, or like maybe becoming that libertarian president you're hoping for, you're going to be waiting a while. This is bad. It needs to be derided as bad. I understand maybe some forgiveness, but the problem is he's not asked for forgiveness. He's not come around. David Chipman has not changed who he is as a person. He is actively anti-gun. Biden tabbed him because he is anti-gun and he's the right person for the job. Biden is apparently, and this may be a subject we'll talk about even next week, but apparently he's got, and I haven't seen him, but 6 executive orders lined up ready to tackle legal gun owners. So it's a scary thing. David Chipman sucks. Jacob, what do you think of it? ATF and David Chipman.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like just non-obvious cliche like outrage to have towards just anything related to the ATF. What's funny? Little tangent here. I work on cars for a living and transmission specifically, and we call automatic transmission fluid ATF. So I'm in this constant internal struggle anytime someone uses that acronym. But
it's okay. Biden has struggles with it too. For those of you, did you see he called it AFT the whole time in the press conference? Just AFT. Sorry, and I know I there's plenty of good reasons to dislike Joe Biden. If it's a slip of the tongue, I say we give that to him, but it just fit in with the joke. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very concerning. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster that we've been, locking Americans in their homes, telling them not to go to work, creating all this economic turmoil, playing on the tensions of the culture war. And, this is a powder keg ready to go off. And, anytime you start, it's the only thing it's good for is gun sales, which, still good luck right now if you're a gun owner trying to go out there and buy ammunition and guns right now. It's been crazy for the past year. It's been like you can't get anything. It's very concerning. My favorite thing to say about gun control is that, and I stole this from Dave Smith, which is I'm very concerned about gun violence. The minute we perform universal background checks on everybody in government and anybody in state power to make sure that they're not responsible for the deaths of millions of people, both home and abroad, then they can have all my guns.
Jordan, anything glowing to say about the ATF?
Oh man,
or Chipman's history? Hit it.
What I was going to say is, if for anybody who has seen the horrifying miniseries Waco, which I think is probably still available on Netflix, it actually manages to span two horrible infringements and encroachments on individuals, because it actually covers Ruby Ridge at right at the beginning of the Waco miniseries. But I think the character, they had to rename the guy who was actually this chipping. I believe that he was known as Mitch Decker in that miniseries, who was an absolutely reprehensible person and probably pretty accurate to how chipping really is, and probably why they didn't get to use his real name in the miniseries. So for anybody I would highly recommend it for what it's worth. It's actually a good series, I think, to get people to question, sort of normies, so to speak, to kind of see, in a very pop culture sort of way, easily accessible, the overreaches of our federal government. And I think it gave a fair treatment of that, like, because I was skeptical to watch it, because I just kind of felt like it would not be factually accurate.
It'll make you want to abolish the police.
It does. I was pleasantly surprised, quite honestly, at just how
I'll check it out.
They don't. I wouldn't say they glaze over kind of what's his name.
The Branch Davidians were not innocent.
Yeah, they didn't glaze over like their insanity.
Libertarian friends either.
Yeah. So like I do think it was well represented though on the whole. So if you want to know that guy though, I would say watch that movie, and I'm pretty sure, or the miniseries, I'm pretty sure it's Mitch Decker is who's supposed to represent him, or a composite of him and a couple other terrible human beings probably. So
yeah, it's a good one. It'll radicalize in normal people. Yeah, I should have gone more into that. Waco was bad, and this guy had a lot to do with it. So there's that. Jordan, give us a piece of your mind.
Sure. Well, I want to do something that I don't think we do enough of, and that is celebrate really awesome things about the free market, and how, like, sometimes the free market just kind of blows my mind at, like, things like spontaneous order in particular, and like things like how people find one another on Twitter, and all of a sudden some little kid like gets a new signed skateboard from Tony Hawk because some guy posted a picture of this kid's little skateboard he had where he wrote Tony Hawk on it, and like just those awesome coincidences of things kind of coming together. And I think something that has been lost in the past year or two, as we kind of enter into year two of this pandemic, is the amazing way in which the free market has made the pandemic survivable we've lost, going on 600,000 people, but let's just think about how the pandemic has been mitigated by unbelievable advances by humans and innovation. And, first and foremost, we see like an unheard of pivot to distributed workforces for knowledge workers. Like, think about how crazy this was for most companies out there that, were operating where most people come in every day to the office, and overnight, like, companies were able to maintain business continuity and people just started working from home. Like, I don't think there was enough of a recognition of like just how amazing that really is, and like how much, different technologies had to be invented via the free market in order to enable that to actually happen and not, bring everything crashing down. I think, though, the one I want to celebrate the most, though, and this might be a little bit perhaps contentious, I don't know, but is honestly the vaccines. It's an unbelievable testament to man's engineering and the unbelievable leaps in taming, nature and life around us, that we were able to process that in the time that we did. I actually happened to know somebody at one of the major pharma producers who was part of one of the teams that developed it, and kind of seeing that inside track of like how many hours went into it, how they were killing themselves to like get it out, and like all of the rigorous testing it went through, and really finding out just how much of the speediness was because unnecessary FDA crap was cleared out of the way for them. And it really makes you think, like, just how much of our sort of collective portfolio of maladies might be solved sooner rather than later if we were to get the FDA out of the way. And so I'm happy to report I'm lucky. Michigan recently opened up for people without chronic issues. They were already open for people with that earlier, but I'm lucky to not have one that would have qualified. So I'm going to be able to get my first shot tomorrow at the big house at the U of M Stadium. So I'm going to very excitedly do that because I am looking forward to joining humanity externally again. And then likewise, we'll be getting depending on which shot I get, I'll probably be getting my follow-up. But again, I think there's a tendency for folks, and the lunatic fringe loves to dive into that as the mark of the beast and everything else. And I don't necessarily want to go down any rabbit holes.
You're going to be a walking 5G Wi-Fi tower.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yes, now I can finally hear.
Which would make me want to get it more, actually. If I could have on-demand 5G, man, right. I would like break laws to get that.
Long story short, I really just want to celebrate the marvel that is the free market, and and not only did it's going to ultimately pull us out of it, it's ultimately what is getting us through it. Like, think about what Amazon and what streaming services and everything else is meant to all of our respective sanities. Like, it's a time to look back and I think reflect on things actually were pretty good and could have been a heck of a lot worse if it weren't for entrepreneurs out there looking to make a buck off our happiness.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And the sad thing is knowing how many more lives could have been saved and how much less economic damage would have been done if the free market were allowed to truly respond to the pandemic. We libertarians know it could. Yep. Like, pretty much all the missteps that were taken towards the handling of this pandemic were because of the government, were because of either people trying to cover things up or because of people underplaying or overplaying things, and all the red tape and stuff. Not just around the vaccine's a little bit controversial. I don't believe any conspiracy theories about it. I'm not a doctor. I need to learn more about the way this the mRNA vaccine differs from traditional ones. I'm not really against it, but I'm still kind of on the fence. So what I'm personally going to do, completely fine with other people who want to get it. I don't think it's like the mark of the beast or anything silly like that. But not just the vaccine. Like, it's sad that, like, one of the things we kept hearing was flatten the curve because we're worried about flooding hospitals. And I was like, well, why in a free market you wouldn't just have to lock people down to prevent that problem from happening? Like, in a free market where healthcare would be actually able to scale to meet the demand, that was such a big thing that I was focused on, like exposing all the regulations that, like, that are basically corrupt, that kept us wide open and very, like, vulnerable to a pandemic happening. It made it so that, like, in a lot of the cities that got hit hard, hospitals were already almost always near capacity. So like all it took was it could have been the pandemic could have been half as bad as it was, and it still would have been a disaster. And it's because of all the red tape and government intervention that goes into kind of enforcing a lot of these monopolies and these the prevention of competition and the creation of new hospitals and new medical facilities and not just vaccines, but also different drug treatments and all that. So it's a shame on one hand to think about all the lost life and all the economic damage caused by the government interventions. But yeah, it is also encouraging to see the ways that just like the even the free market, when it is like being choked to death by the state government, it's still able to create these amazing mechanisms that allow people to still flourish and to live life and to limit the as things from being as bad as they could have been.
We don't have too many examples because the state is so overwhelming of like true market action. And I think this is one of those incredible moments, especially when we talk about the virus, where people took these cease and desist orders from the government and tore them up and threw them away. And was like, nope, I'm going to keep testing. I'm going to keep working on this vaccine. I'm going to keep this going because this is going to be important. And I'm willing to risk my job, and I'm willing to risk my, a whole career, and I'm willing to risk going to jail, getting fined. I'm willing to risk our company going under because I believe this is working. And this is what the government. Imagine that if the government did not have any influence over that, how quick. So I believe the vaccine was invented the day after because they had the sequence. They developed a counter sequence. The weekend, they actually had a counter sample. And then, of course, even them, it's funny because while they were breaking government orders, it's not like they were just giving them out. Even they believe in testing. Even the free market is like, hey, we're still going to test this thing. Yeah. We're just going to do it real quick. The government says, I think it's funny, man, there's that whole like, oh, you got the vaccine, you trust the government. Well, the government says I can't have one for like 10 years. Like The government had to concede to the free market at every turn because people were like, no, we want this now. You need to get out of the way. You need to make orders and take all these rules that you have and you need to tear them up and you need to get them out of the way. Was government still involved? Yeah. And they really shouldn't have been. So like, I understand, everybody make the decision for themselves, but how much would have been mitigated? It would have been great. Well, I do want to share, I used to be a paramedic. And so this really gets to me hard because people don't think about this part of it, but especially the ventilators. So hospital equipment is actually dispersed at a federally regulated level. And so you are actually not allowed to have like more than X amount of ultrasound machines for X amount of people. And it's the way it's artificial. It's artificially creating a market that's creating a bubble that's making those pieces of equipment more expensive than they actually are. And that's the reason these laws exist. I mean, they don't even pretend otherwise, because the hospitals are like, well, we don't even like, we'll pay you whatever. Like, we just want a whole bunch of these machines. And so it's funny that the ventilation thing came to bite us in the butts because we said we have to flatten our curve because we don't have enough ventilators. That was regulated. The reason we didn't have enough ventilators is because that's regulated by a federal policy. And I remember I had to bag somebody to a hospital that was 45 minutes away because we weren't allowed to have a ventilator in that hospital because that hospital is too close to another hospital that had a ventilator. And it was just, something about the way the population works. And it is, the free market really is awesome. I'm glad you brought this up, Jordan, because it is something that for me is so celebratory. Yeah. And I'm glad that after like an hour and a bit of cracking down on like what the frick the Mises is doing on like social issues, economic issues are pretty awesome. So
and
like
this is where we can all agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like economic issues are really cool. And so like if you're not on board with like how cool they are, like I see these libertarians a lot and I'm friends with them. A lot of them. They're all in on the social issues. And they're like, oh, I don't know about the economic issues. And I just want to like crack the egg on them so bad. Just be like, dude, it is really cool. Like what the free market, what voluntary human action does is really cool and really good for people.
Well, and it's a shame that like the government acting the way it does with these coercive forces and incentives, it poisons the efforts of the free market. Like let's say like that we knew factually that like the vaccine was. And I think it likely is that it's safe. There's no long-term side effects and all that. The reason why people are like hesitant of it is because of the government.
Yeah,
it's because people are like, well, the government can't be held accountable, and we can't trust them. It's a lot easier to trust a market entity like a business or whatnot who stands to be held accountable for their actions, accountable for the harm they cause, financially accountable, like they'll lose business. So that's how the free market is so beautiful, and that like people are more able to trust these things when they come out, and all the government has lended itself to do is to poison the well and make people really hesitant. And I understand where the people are coming from, because it's just everything the government touches, it poisons. And so it's just, it creates like, especially for people who aren't like I'm in this weird, like I'm not a doctor or anything, but I have like a lot of friends who are doctors. So it's like I'm always talking to them and picking their mind and trying to understand these things. And it's tough. Like you as a consumer, you don't want to just like blindly do things, blindly just like, well, I'm just going to trust what people say to put in my body. Like you want to kind of make an informed decision. But then there's a lot of people that don't even trust the medical community at all, just because of how much the government is involved in that. And it's a shame. There's so much hope and optimism in like what we were talking about here with the free market. And like, I'm so down with that. And I think economics are so important. I think that it's not just like a nerdy thing to discuss economic theory. I think economics is like an important part of life that we need to talk about more. And it's just a shame that the state has to ruin it.
Yeah. I would say the two most under-taught topics in public schools, and ideally no schools would be public, but publicly funded at least. But the two, I think it was the economist James Buchanan. He said the single biggest thing that they don't teach but should is the nature of spontaneous order. The fact that people tend to just work together and tend to naturally subdivide their tasks and go into division of labor. Like we don't teach people an appreciation and wonderment really for what that's really doing. And something that has pulled 98% of, human population of the earth out of poverty over the past 300-400 years. Like there's this massive wonderment that we just glaze over every day and just don't even think about it.
Yeah. All right, Jacob, piece of your mind.
Maybe change my what they're going to bring up. Something that's really been bugging me is what's going on at the borders. And I mean, like nothing has changed. Like we're still locking people in. Now it's what the child migrant facilities is now what the Biden administration is calling them.
Overflow facilities.
And what really pisses me off, and that just like I have a lot of friends that are Democrats that are from the left, voted for Bernie, and like they were rightfully very critical of Trump and the stuff going on at the border, but like they aren't willing to see how much worse it's gotten, because now we've created like the worst possible situation where the messaging and like the platform that was run was like, well, Trump's so bad on immigration and Biden's going to change that, and now like the people coming to the border are coming in larger numbers, and they're coming like it's almost like we put a welcome mat in front of the chainsaw. It's like we didn't remove the chainsaw, but now it's like we're lowering people in. It's almost like we're entrapped. Like at least the only silver lining about the immigration under Trump.
ICE wouldn't know anything about entrapping people, would they? I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I know. But the only silver lining to the Trump immigration policy was that like it was consistent. Like Trump was like, "Don't come here. We don't want you here. And if you come here, we're going to lock you up." And then it was like now the Democrats are in power, and it's like they just spent 4 years like going hysterical about this stuff, and again, rightfully so. But like they were so overwhelmingly negative and like emboldened to call out this crap, and now it's like nobody wants to do it I'm not saying that there are some good people on the left still that are doing that are trying to still kind of blow the whistle on what's going on, but it's like it's kind of like in hushed reverent, oh, it's bad, but at least it's not Trump, so and it's like they really don't want to talk about it, how like it's actually gotten worse. Like it's actually worse to trick people into thinking you can come here now. We want you to come here. Diversity is our strength. Oh, that we're still going to lock you in a cage and take your kids from you, and all this crap that they're not they're not going to change. And it's so infuriating to try to get this, like, just to get this acknowledgement, just to be like, listen, let's even say that Trump was such a unmitigated evil that like he just had to be kicked out at any cost, and that we had to put Biden in. You can't like if you're going to say that, fine, but don't ignore what Biden's doing. Hold his feet, and it pisses me off that the media won't hold his feet to the fire with that same intensity that they were Trump, and it's so aggravating.
So going into the election, and I mentioned this on a post that became a little bit popular, but it was, the idea was, let's kick Trump out and hold Biden accountable. Okay, check. Kick Trump out, check. That happened. Hold Biden accountable, having trouble with that check mark right now.
Right.
And now here's the thing. Now, Jacob, it's funny that you bring this up. We actually talked about the problem in immigration. We went into detail on it a couple of weeks ago. Not that it's old news. It's getting worse. And it is, I said it then and I'll say it now, this is as bad as it's been. And the place that Biden actually increased the enforcement of where you're allowed to take pictures. And the one facility, he's got one facility that they'll let you take pictures at, this is according to an Axios article, that you're allowed to take pictures at because the other two are so much worse. The one that you're allowed to take pictures at is as bad as anything you saw under Trump. Okay. So imagine now the conditions at those other two. I mean, what we're up to, I think it's funny because 2 weeks ago it was 14,000 kids, and I think it's up to 21,000. Like we're hemorrhaging right now. And I'm glad you bring this up because I think it really fits with the topic, Jacob, is because I do have, it's not a lot, but there's a couple times that CNN will be like, yeah, this sucks. We dropped the ball. You know what I mean? Like this is ugly. And then you got to hold on to those moments. I mean, Axios of all places is reporting how much worse it's got, and so I do think it's easy to paint with a broad brush and like, look, none of the Democrats care. Okay. That's probably true about most of them, because people are partisan and tribal and just being like, well, it's not that they don't care, but like, I mean, you saw Trump at the debates. That had to go, right? Like, I mean, come on, we can't have a guy who's like downright unhinged. We had to do something, But I think this fits because what it is I am very eager to call out the hypocrisy, but I need to curb that feeling because what I need to do is make this an evangelical moment,
right,
for my sincere friends on the left, who are just like, I am so sick of this. If you thought it was a human rights violation then, and you still would now, if you're an honest person. And most of the time when you talk to people, of course, internet, everything's a fight, right? But when you talk to people genuinely, they acknowledge that. And I've had several friends that were like, I honestly thought Biden was going to let all the people that he put in with the 1994 crime bill out by now. I really did. I really thought, I didn't see the war with Syria coming. I really thought he was going to pull all the troops back. I really thought, I mean, what he did with the no-knock warrants. He sent his own White House lawyers in support of the no-knock warrants, arguing against Breonna Taylor, right? Like that. It's a disaster, right? Joe Biden's a disaster. So if you were serious about that stuff, and I hope you were, because like I was with you then. I was a Black Lives Matter person. I was an abolish the ICE person. We marched together. Like if you know me in real life, like we had protests together. We were friends. We went to rallies together. You know me. You know my priorities. Okay?
Right.
Are your priorities going to change now? Or you got that same energy? Because I think a lot of times it's about keeping the same energy that is really getting, I think, to the hypocrisy bone. Because I think what we've got is we've got an AOC being like, it's kind of bad, but I don't know. It's bad. It's bad, right? I don't want to say it's not bad, but and you check people's Twitter accounts and certain ones like respect to Adam Bates. I know a lot of people love him, but he went from tweeting about immigration 3 times a day to 3 times in the last 4 months. Right. And it's like, what happened to that energy, man? Like, you hated what was going on with immigration. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a little bit bad. Like, keep that same energy like that you had then. And that's what I want to, like, I do want to keep people accountable, but more so I want to bring them in. That accountability should be an evangelical tool.
Absolutely.
Because this is something we, the Libertarian Party, do not give ground on. I don't even want to say Libertarian Party. We, the Libertarian movement, the Liberty movement, recognizes that you have the right to travel and to make a better life for yourself. And I don't care if it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, who have each told you to go home and stay home and get taken advantage of by your drug cartels and by your mafias and by your, sex trafficking rings. Like, go home and try to make your own countries better. Screw off.
Or at the very least, can we like if you're going to have a border, can you find a way to enforce that without perpetually locking
without being a monster?
Yeah, like I was talking about earlier. I was like, listen, like as much as I'm a pretty radical anarchist in my philosophical views, but listen, if I want to be pragmatic and compromise for a bit, can we at least find some compromise? Can we stop enforcing the borders with the only way it would get worse than this would be if we were literally putting landmines and people with guns and just pointing it. Although that might be better because that would keep people away and you would have less people killed and less people locked up. So in a way that's it's a combination of pretending to be virtuous and better, but then just being the same. And that's what I hate about the duopoly and either side, both the left and the right, when they get caught up in this crap where the other side is evil. And it's it's tough because I marched with Black Lives Matter. I marched with when they were protesting police brutality, and it's tough because I want to support them in those things, but then it's when suddenly it's the other person in power, it's they lose that passion. It's like democracy. And I know a lot of people, sometimes libertarians are split on this. Some like democracy and some don't. I tend to lean towards not liking democracy because it's kind of like this opiate that pacifies people. They're like, well, yeah, stuff is still bad, but democracy worked. We voted and got our guy in. So it makes them more willing to put up with the same evil crap.
If your kid's been ripped away from you at your border, go tell them that we got the right guy in charge of ripping away your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad Jordan does believe in intellectual property because he said this 2 weeks ago, and I've used it several times since then. But the way the border is being run, it's not an accident. You would have to try to be as bad as we are to these people. If you were just incompetent and weren't very good at your job, you do better than this. And so it's terrorism. We're trying to scare them away. And it's because Jordan said it, if you just put somebody incompetent of it would wind up better. Sorry, go ahead, Jordan. I twice in a row now.
No,
I'm stealing your words.
Well, I think I would boil it down to, like you said, it is terrorism, or the catchphrase that I see used a lot is the cruelty is the point. That is why this is the way it is. This is intentional, and I think that's another thing that we can extrapolate to more just government at large, is that a lot of times when really crappy situations are playing out, it's because someone in government wants it that way because they're benefiting in some way from it. And I think something that we can do a lot more of just collectively, and this all of us should hopefully be able to do to some extent. I really love this quote from libertarian fiction author Robert Lefebvre, where he said that government is a disease masquerading as its own cure. And I think that is so often the case when you think about, so many of the things we're talking about here, like how you can track it back 2-3 steps in the exercise of the 5 whys. Why did that happen? Well, why did that happen? Well, why did that happen? Eventually you end back with some, government piece of legislation that is now having an unintended consequence, or could be having a very intended consequence that's being masked as an unintended consequence because that somebody is benefiting, or is, if I can quote, this is actually a Big Lebowski t-shirt. So, I'll quote when he's saying, it's like Lenin said, you follow the money. And, he's saying, I am the walrus. No, VI Lenin, so, but it's, you follow the money, look who will benefit. And that's, really, really what the case is. And you gotta dig into it. And I think we can do a lot more as libertarians to help expose that and help kind of lead people through that 5 whys process to show that, hey, the problem kind of started with government's intrusion to begin with here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you both for your thoughts today. I really appreciate you. Jordan, I know we got you for one more week. Thank goodness for that. Give your wife a thank you for me. I know you were supposed to be a temporary guy, but supposedly we'll be getting Aaron back next week. If not, we'll find maybe just ask Jordan nicely. But probably haven't seen the last of you because,
I'm happy to sub in on occasion here and there.
All right, sweet. And Jacob, I know you're just a sub in as well, but I appreciate your thoughts, especially talking about this one. Because, talking about the Mises Caucus without somebody on the Mises Caucus in it probably would have got bad.
And I appreciate the invite, and I know it got anytime the Mises Caucus comes up, it's going to be a little heated and contentious. But I appreciate you inviting me on to talk about it. I appreciate you, Jordan, and and you were pretty fair, I think, in the things you said. Even when we disagreed, you were trying to be charitable, and I could see that, and I appreciate that. So, and
Jacob, never having met you, I think we've commented on the same posts here and there on Facebook or something. But you're the sort of person I want to maintain a dialogue with, as opposed to just send ourselves back into our respective echo chambers. So, let's keep up the dialogue and a civil one. So,
absolutely, I agree.
I think we both agree you're too good for him, Jacob. I know you get to disagree, but I'm just throwing it out there. So, Jacob, where can people find you at? You have your own podcast that I listen to. It's an anarcho-Christian podcast for people who like it, but I'll let you hype it up and not me.
Yeah, so my page and podcast, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter. Podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, all that, is Daniel 3, Biblical Anarchy. So my focus on my page and podcast is kind of connecting the Christian faith to the liberty movement and showing how a lot of scriptures, a lot of teachings within the church have been warped over time by the state.
The Book of Judges is a great one.
The Book of Judges is an amazing book. I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, I have a lot of people on, and we talk about these things, and other things as well. But that's the focus of the page and the podcast, is just to show how the Christian should be embracing the mantra of the early church, which was no king but Christ, which is to not bow down to Caesar, and to live that out consistently. So you can find me there, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I got a website I'm working on, but I have no time. So
Jordan, is there anything you want to hype up?
No, I tend to be a lurker in the liberty movement most of the time. I tend to like to just kind of get into conversations here or there and support causes I like financially and where I can. If anybody wants to reach out to me, though, I'm always happy to chat. You can find me on Facebook as Jordan C. Kleinsmith. It's really where I'm most active. I mostly use Twitter for trolling. That's about it.
Can you use Twitter
trolling
for
big
else?
brands?
They limit you to 140 characters. Oh, give us your full thoughts on the Fed. You're like, oh, okay. Let me be nuanced about this. I think it's funny when people try and they're like, all right, this is part 1 of 20. So just
right.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on, guys. This is a great one. And listeners, if you're listening, I really appreciate you listening, being part of the conversation. We have a lot of these tough conversations like this, but if you like it, please subscribe to the Weird Libertarians Network. Give us a follow. Show us off to your friends. They've deleted us on social media and YouTube and all that stuff. So the only way we're getting out is by you telling people how awesome we are. Our views are still great, and they're still going up, but we're just saying if they're going to go up further, we need your help. So thanks so much again, guys. We'll talk to you.